the City Council meeting of South Burlington on January 2nd, 2024. Happy New Year, y'all. And our first item is the Pledge of Allegiance. So, I don't know, I'll start. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty. Second item, instructions on exiting the building in case of an emergency.
Thank you for those who are joining us in the room. If we have an emergency in the room, you can go out to the rear of the auditorium on the left or right, and then turn left and right, and go outside. For those who are joining us remotely, thank you also for participating. If you would like to speak on any item on the agenda, you can turn your camera on and the chair will call on you, or you can indicate that you would like to chat or you would like to comment in the chat box, and I will have the chair call on you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Agenda review. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in order of agenda items? Okay, seeing none. Any comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda? So please come forward, sir, and make sure the green light is nice and bright.
It's on.
Okay, good enough.
Helen, I knew you about 30 years ago or 40 years ago 30 years ago when I was coaching soccer and ran into your husband at the time. My name is Jerry Spring. I've lived in Burlington for probably 25 out of the last 50 years. I'm not young. We moved to South Burlington about a year and a half ago after spending 15 years in Colorado. And I must say, my initial impression of South Burlington has been very positive. I think whoever laid out the building plans did a great job. Especially, there's a lot of housing, but what caught my eye was the walkability. And I think whoever did it deserves a lot of praise. That's not why I'm here. What I want to talk about is, in the 16 months I've been here, I drive a lot daily. I don't drive very, very far, but I go into town, into Burlington quite a bit. And I live in Dorset Street and Swiss Street. So I go into town, and almost daily, I come across people running red lights.
Who are, pardon?
Running red lights.
Oh, okay. Ooh.
On Dorset.
Not so much on Spear Street. Certainly not downtown in the central district of South Burlington on Market Street. There's probably too much traffic for that. But it starts on Spear Street and gets aggravated as you approach Route 7. So Allen Road, Swiss Street, Farrell Street, whatever that sweet street by Safeway becomes, runs into Route 7 almost every day. And I think that, I don't know what's caused it all, and people can speculate. It's more people moving here, COVID, little disregard for everyone's politics and people, splitting apart. But I think that what you ought to at least study is the feasibility of putting cameras in place for red lights and also for traffic. I can attest cameras do work. I lived in Boulder for a couple of years, and the only ticket that I came across was my wife getting a speeding ticket from a camera. She wasn't happy, but it worked. And very few people ran red lights there because there were cameras. You probably don't need cameras everywhere, but I think you should at least look at it. Because the message that people are getting is when light turns yellow, you don't hesitate anymore. You just accelerate. And I just worry about the 15 and 16-year-old kids that are learning to drive, and what message are they going to get? Is this the norm? So I think you got to look at it. I mean, you could avoid some very serious problems over the next year or two, and you certainly don't want to justify, well, we had to spend $50,000 for cameras. Cameras aren't cheap. You've got to monitor it. You need a person there, but you send the ticket out, and so you get some money back to mitigate it with fines. But hopefully people are going to recognize that running red lights and speeding is not an ideal thing to do, at least not in South Burlington. So I think the future building you have, there's more and more apartments going up, as you all know, because you've all approved them all. Uh, what I think you need to at least check out. I mean, there's going to be a lot of unintended consequences with all the building. People are going to be walking from Market Street across Dorset Street to the malls, hopefully not taking their cars. How are those people going to get across Dorset Street? You're going to tell the car people, there's 22 people walking across. What's 7 at night? Why are they doing that? I think just the consequences of all the growth just need to look at. It's going to impact city services. I don't know what they are, but you've got a lot of experts in the city that should look at it. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
This is last spring.
Spring. Is there anyone else? We don't have anyone joining us. Oh, okay.
Barbara's here, but not to speak.
All right, no, I meant online, online. We don't have anyone. Okay. So then, if that's the end of comments and questions, Mike, were you here to make comments and questions on anything not on the agenda?
Not at the moment.
Okay. All righty. Let's move on to counselors' announcements and reports on committee assignments. And then the city manager's report. So, Larry, do you have anything to report?
Oh, there we go. Just quickly that, just so I want to try to keep council apprised of the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program. The training is starting next week at Champlain College for Champlain and UVM students and some community members. Want to make sure the public knows that if they'd like an appointment, the CVOEO site is in the University Mall again this year. And in order to have an appointment, you will need to call 211 later in the month. It's not active yet. And I'll keep everybody apprised of that as we get closer to the start date on February 1st.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Megan.
Well, since our last meeting, I attended the Affordable Housing Committee meeting, and two things I just wanted to bring to your attention. There was a proposed idea to merge the Affordable Housing Committee and the Housing Trust Fund committees, and I recommended, and people agreed that we wait until you finish your term so that those committees can both discuss that idea prior to anything moving forward. The second was having to do with the new SR 100 Act 47?
40, is it 42 or 47?
47?
47.
Maybe it's 47.
And our
No.
and our affordability, the inclusive zoning. And so they weighed in so that the Planning Commission could take into account their ideas regarding what would be an appropriate proportion, depending on how many units were being built, what proportion should be
Different than what's in our regs
different.
now.
So we
And
are,
I'm assuming increasing.
that's,
A higher
well,
percentage or?
it's actually, there was concern that it was going to be difficult to build housing if we had too high of a percentage, because housing costs, the construction costs are going up. So I don't know what this will become in the Planning Commission, but what came out of the Affordable Housing Committee discussion was that 10% on 10 units, and once you get to 20 units, then it goes up to 20%. So that is on the rental units. And I don't remember there being any change with regard to the owner occupied, yeah. But I
Okay.
could be wrong on that issue.
All right, thank
Yeah.
you. Great. Tim.
Thank you, Helen. Yes, I attended the Public Art Committee meeting a couple weeks ago, and they went over the results of the public survey they had about the impending art installation at J.C. Park. and there was a lot of positive feedback and a little bit of critical feedback, but mostly positive. And I've seen pictures of the piece. It's very nice, and look forward to progress on that. I also wanted to remind viewers and the city, anybody, because I have these famous Tim's tips, right? Lock your bike with a kryptonite, write check. Don't click on email attachments. The new one is, please, everybody, check your credit card and debit card statements very carefully this time of year. Scammers will try to deposit or charge very small amounts to your cards and hope that you don't notice. You need to go over everything with a fine-tooth comb. If you don't recognize it, call your bank, call your credit card company. If you have to, challenge it and find out where it came from, because you need to get it removed, and if possible, you might need to get a new credit card. That has happened to somebody in our city, so be very vigilant about that. The other reminder is that COVID-19 is resurging right now, with hospitalizations up 16% around the southern part of the U.S. I don't think Vermont is as bad, but I have a lot of friends that have been infected in the last month. I had a very nice Christmas. Thank you very much. My son came up from Boston, and where was the snow? Where was the
I'm
snow?
still waiting.
There was no snow.
No.
I've never seen that much lack of sunshine. If it's,
Yeah.
there was no sun. And I looked at my solar input for this year, and the whole year was worse than any other year. Although May was outstanding, the rest of the months there was so much rain that it was really awful. So anyway, so that's all. I hope everybody else had a nice. Excuse
Today
me.
was
What?
beautiful, yeah, I'll say.
You'll find out.
Andrew, do you have anything to report?
Can you hear me okay, Helen?
Yes.
Okay. So no committee meetings since we last met, but I did find some snow, Tim, on top of some of the peaks. And if you ever want to go hiking with me, I can show you where it is.
Okay, thank you. And I don't have anything to report. I just had a wonderful, enjoyable Christmas and New Year's. It was quiet and it was nice, and I wished we'd had snow. For sure. So, Jesse.
Thank you. So happy New Year, happy 2024. We're really excited on the leadership team about what is going to come for the city this year. Larry, I just have a quick question for you on the CVOEO. Is that something we can cross promote? Is it something that they're advertising that we could put out through City News, or is that acceptable?
Sure. I'll try to get you some information.
Okay, that'd be great.
It is income sensitive.
Yeah.
Right.
I think we might have some participants in our senior center recreation and parks groups that may benefit from that. Thanks. So just a few very quick updates from me. Alana and I had a great meeting with our delegation right before Christmas, specifically around City Center and the TIF district, and bringing them up to speed with some of the analysis we brought to you all during the budget process. Senator Ram Hinsdale and Emily are interested in coming to the council. They both sit on the housing committees in the legislature. They're interested in coming to the council in February and having a kind of conversation with you all about housing legislation that's going through this session. So look for that on your upcoming agenda planners. Just a reminder, we have a lot of council activity this month. You're meeting every Monday this month, or if that's not true, you're meeting one Tuesday and most Mondays. So
Also
January 8th.
Some other time too, like a Thursday or whatever. Yeah, a lot.
January 8th, next week you'll have the discussion on the city plan and discussion about adoption. The 16th you'll have a public hearing on the budget, approval of the ballot items and the bond votes, as well as a pension update and receipt of the employee handbook, and hopefully the first reading of the rental ordinance. The 22nd is your steering committee meeting, which will be not only the budgets, but your first public hearing on a charter change. And then the 29th is the second public hearing on the charter change and your possible action for the ballot. So just a reminder, we're going to keep you busy this month, and thank you very much in advance for your service. That's all.
What did you say?
No snow, may as well come to council meetings.
That's right. Well, without any snow, not that much. You can't even say I've got a shovel. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. We only have 2 items, disbursements, and determined that the charter proposal to increase the number of school board members to 7 is too long or unwieldy to set out an amended form and approve the attached public hearings notice, including a concise summary of the charter proposal.
So I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second?
Is there any discussion, any questions? All right, hearing none, all those in favor? You know, do we do a roll call? I always get confused.
You only have to do a roll call if the vote's not unanimous.
Oh, okay. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 I
So that passes unanimously. All right.
Is it unwieldy or unwieldy?
Wieldy.
Thank you.
Did I say unwieldy?
No, it was written unwieldy. So
It's my mistake.
Unwieldy.
I don't know whose mistake it was, but
Unwieldy.
you read it as
Unwieldy. I read it right. Okay, item 7. We're a little
So,
ahead, aren't we?
I would recommend, I think you need to hold 7, 8, 9, and 10 until the relevant folks are here,
Okay.
and 11. So I would recommend you go to 12 and 13.
Okay.
We can fly through this.
Okay. Discuss the naming of Overlook Park.
So this is kind of an interesting question. As you probably read in 7 days, this is just a question for your feedback tonight. No action, just some direction to myself and the staff. Not in 7 days. In the other paper, a couple of editions ago, there was a story about the Underwood family and their expectations when they transferred ownership of the property to the city. This was before the time of many of us on staff. During that process, they submitted a public records request to the city, and as we went through those records, there were some that, for technology reasons, didn't get to us. So we invited in the Underwood family before that article went to print to understand what their concern was and have a conversation with them. As you all likely know, the Underwoods were huge contributors to this community. Mr. Underwood was a assessor for the city for many years, and they are interested in some acknowledgement of their family, given that the council has now named that parcel Hubbard Park, which I don't think you have an interest in undoing. So they expressed an interest in educational piece at Hubbard Park, or Overlook Park was also part of their family history, family parcel. They had their barn at Overlook Park for many years. They have this really beautiful painting of the barn right at where the parking lot is. So we had a conversation about would a recognition of their family's contribution through the naming of that parcel, the change of the name of that parcel, be interesting to them, and they expressed that would feel good to them and their family. So with your consent, that's a pretty big change in the city. It's interesting to go from Overlook, which is, we did a bit of research, is really just a geographical name. It's where you overlook the lake. It's a little interesting going from
Before
Overlook
the
to
trees
Underwood.
grew so tall, you could really overlook.
But if you're willing to consider that, we'd like to do a little more research, bring you some information about their family, and have you consider that naming.
That seems
Yeah.
appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah. If
Can we
I'm
call
glad to
it
hear
the Underwood Overlook?
Is that your suggestion?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
that's what I was thinking. Yeah,
I don't know.
as a
The Underwood Overlook. I don't know.
It's got great logo potential. The
It does.
the Underwood Overlook.
Yes, it does.
the Underwood. Right.
Would that also include the informational plaque at Hubbard,
It would likely include an informational plaque at Overlook,
at Overlook? Okay,
because they could really center it around the barn that was on that parcel.
great.
Okay.
All right, so
In some ways, though, it would be nice to include some recognition at Hubbard Park as well.
Right.
I
and
mean,
just
to
their property.
in terms of a plaque that has kind of the history that the Underwood family sold that property to the city of South
Right.
Burlington,
Right.
and then and we named it in honor of Tom. But to make that so it's not lost.
I agree.
Um,
And some kind of map showing their property, I think, would be nice too, because that's a pretty big parcel,
it was a big parcel.
right? Yeah.
I
Okay.
like the way Underwood Overlook rolls off my tongue.
Yeah.
So if they could be linked together somehow and maintain that, that would be nice. If people agreed with me, it's okay. If you disagree, but
Underwood. Reminds me, my aunt lived in a subdivision in Monrovia, Liberia that was called Sunken Heights.
Sunken Heights. It was near Syncor.
Right, so Underwood Overlook reminds me of Sunken Heights a little bit.
Military intelligence.
Pardon me?
Military intelligence.
Right. Okay, so do you have
That's
enough
great
marching
direction.
orders on that? Okay,
We will move forward.
all right, we got 9 more minutes. Yes,
So I was out talking to my old friend here, but were you just talking about the,
Can you come to the?
yes, why don't you come to the mic, Michael? Yeah.
let's see, is this working? Okay, it sounds like it is. Happy New Year, everybody.
Thank you.
So regarding the overlook, and I do understand that there may be some conversation about the existing overlook being named for Underwood, correct? Is that what you were just chatting about? So I'd like to offer the thinking that on a long-term basis, who knows, maybe even shorter-term basis, that that the former Underwood property, now Hubbard, would still be a much better site for an overlook. The obvious reason is that the property has a much better view than our existing overlook facility, and I don't imagine that house that obstructs a good part of the panorama. I don't imagine that's going to go anywhere anytime soon. There's no obstruction that exists when you get up on the plateau at the Hubbard Park. It's exceedingly gorgeous. Another good reason to continue entertaining the overlook, or perhaps a second overlook being there, is that it was intended. There was a plan that was developed, and on a long-term basis, people saw it being viable. Given the view. So that's another reason. And then yet another is that it is an overlook that would be accessible via bike and pedestrian. And the access to an overlook at the Hubbard Park would be far preferable for bikers and pedestrians than it would be our existing overlook, where you have to get onto Spear Street and risk your life doing so. And I don't know that you're going to see Spear Street widened in our lifetime in order to accommodate bicycle lanes. So my thinking is that the Hubbard Park is an exceedingly better overlook for our community than will be the other one on a long-term basis. And I don't think that the Underwood family would have any objection whatsoever to having that overlook named after them. In fact, I know that. Thank you.
Yes. We skipped the other ones, Michael. Yeah, because people weren't here and we were early. So we were making good use of our time.
Well, if we're on item 12, I can retire. I heard what Mike at the mic said, but I don't necessarily agree with that. I think the city should reconsider the error that it made, talk to Tom Hubbard, ask him his opinion about whether the park should be renamed for the Underwood family, as because they wrote quite a heartrending piece in the other paper. And I think the city should take that into account and really try everything to rename Hubbard for the Underwood family.
Okay, thank you. I have a question. I don't recall. I don't know if even I don't know how long the Overlook park has been in existence. A long, long time. But I'm just curious if the city bought the property or if it was gifted, or if there if we were to follow up on Mike Simino's thoughts of moving the Overlook part onto Hubbard Park, then what do we do with that property? And are there any requirements or restrictions? That would be important for me to know before even renaming it, potentially. I just don't know how the city got hold of it.
I think we purchased it, but
Well, we probably purchased it from somebody, but
Was it 92 or 93 that the Free Press reporter Molly
oh, right.
took Kunstler, the architect, around South Burlington, and she wrote a really long article about it with his opinion. Do you remember that? I have a copy of it. I'll dig it up and send it to you
Okay.
later. It's very interesting.
Okay.
He had some choice words for Overlook Park. That's all I remember.
Oh,
But so at least prior to 92, it's been there, I
okay.
think. something
Well,
like
I just think we need to know that before we make any changes. Actually, would
It's a
be
great
good
question.
to
Yep.
understand. Okay. Well, I guess the council would like you to proceed with the conversations and we can go from there. See what happens. Let's see, we still have 3 minutes. Is there something else you want to,
Can do my evaluation.
the evaluation process?
Sure.
That shouldn't take too long. So let's go to item 13 then.
that looked fine to me. And it was a form we've seen before,
Absolutely.
and I don't see any reason to change.
Okay. In the past, I think the council, I think was it Tim and myself who did the,
Yes.
So you guys did the contract negotiation with me,
That's
but
right. But
unless
not
you
the
want to
whole-
renegotiate my contract this
No,
year,
no.
I
Okay.
think
All
we
right.
avoid that.
You're
this
right.
year.
Okay. Then so this is just
This is just an
so we
annual
don't
review.
need a special committee. One less meeting or two. Okay.
Can I just give a few sentences for
You
the
certainly
record?
may, but
Um,
I agree with Megan. This is familiar and it seems timely and
Are there any changes?
there are no changes.
And the schedule? What's the schedule?
So the schedule is you'll get online. So actually, there is one change. Our HR director has built online forms for you to fill out that will make it much easier to do the actual aggregation of the data. Yeah. We've tested them several times. There have been some really fun evaluations of me thus far in the testing of them. So you will get those probably this week, but no later than January 8th. They're then due back by the 24th. All the data from both the leadership team members and the council will be shared with all of us. And then on February 5th, we will meet in executive session. And then at your meeting on February 20th, you'll give an update to the community.
That's good.
okay.
Thanks.
Any thoughts or questions? No concerns? Excellent. So it appears as if we can go back to our presented schedule to item 7, which is holding a public hearing on the city plan 2024. And Paul Connor is at the table. So we have to open the public hearing.
So moved?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 So we are in a public hearing. Paul, did you want to preference anything?
Just briefly to say that at one of your December meetings that you had voted to warn the public hearing on some adjustments that you had made from the original draft. This draft includes those. And just a reminder to you that this is a two-part public hearing tonight and next Monday. That's all I've really got. This is the public's time to share their feedback on it.
All right. Are there any comments from the public? Okay, so would you like to begin? Looks like we have 3 at the moment. 4.
Okay, is this on? It sounds like
It
it.
is.
Okay, Linda Bailey from Larch Road. And you guys have put a lot of work into this city plan, and I thank you for it to start off with. Unfortunately, right at the beginning, you have a dichotomy of words that are used. Your very first overriding principle is about climate resilience, but then you move into climate mitigation, which is a very different type of thing. Climate mitigation looks to stop adding greenhouse gases and such to our atmosphere, while climate resilience is more about how you help your population, your city in this case, deal with climate changes that are happening and so forth. About the only part I found is in stormwater, is you're doing a very good job with that, but I don't see anything in it on ways to help families. Oh, if we get a 2-week stretch of 95 degrees and 80% humidity, a lot of people don't have air conditioning or heat pumps in their homes. Are there any plans to help with those people? Things like that are part of climate resilience. I'd like to see a lot more of that in the comp plan. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know. Michael, and then we'll go up the line. All the red plaid shirts get to speak today.
Michael Mittag. I'm a 21-year resident of South Burlington, and so I serve on the Planning Commission. Among the things that are written in this plan is that our city needs to understand what to expect for the future and how we can sustainably plan for it. And further, it says it's essential to consider the city's sustainability and ability to provide facilities and services which meet residents' expectations and maintain our community's quality of life. A few pages later on Action 3, it says, study the population carrying capacity of our city to maintain a high quality of life. I don't think we can do that without something that we're missing. So I'm here to recommend and request that South Burlington establish growth targets consistent with the goals of this plan that we're considering tonight. It's a growth management plan. In order to implement our plan, our municipal plan, it's necessary to know what our expected growth will be. We should have a plan for that. We don't have good forward visibility of future development. I think it's fair to say that currently we sort of react and then plan to build the necessary infrastructure as and when development proposals come before the DRB. That's not really planning, or it's not a good way to plan. A growth management plan would permit us to plan rather than react. City Plan 2024 has many goals, which I think will be quite difficult to reach without a plan or a growth management plan. On page 153 of your package, or 3 of it says we should consider the use of our resources and the consequences of growth and development on our community. Well, we need a plan for how to use those resources and to know the consequences of the growth and development of our community, on the community. We have a specific goal as well to plan development so as to maintain historic settlement patterns of compact village and urban centers separated by rural countryside. there are then a couple of other items below that, but a growth management plan would allow us to assign development to the community centers and development areas or growth areas where we want it to happen. And without a forward-looking plan, we would not know where the expansion of infrastructure would have to be located if we don't know where development will happen and how much of it will happen. We have a specific goal to maintain and enhance recreational opportunities. Growth should not significantly diminish the value or availability of outdoor recreational activities. Well, we would need a plan to make sure that that doesn't happen. And that's can be part of a growth management plan. The Planning Commission is required, when considering an amendment to the plan, to report on the probable impact of surrounding area, resulting in an increase of traffic maybe, resulting in what impact it will have on municipal and school taxes, and what will be the needs for public facilities. A growth management plan would be a very, very useful guide for the Planning Commission on that particular item. Our infrastructure, including wastewater treatment, sewer and water distribution system, emergency services, transportation infrastructure, and schools, can absorb only a finite number of new dwellings before the infrastructure services have to be expanded or they become overwhelmed. We know from the past, we had a lot of reports during interim zoning from several city departments that they were understaffed and overwhelmed. A growth management plan would allow us to establish targets for each of the areas where we want residential and or commercial development to happen, and the clear forward visibility of a growth management plan will help everyone and will ensure that needed additional public infrastructure and services are made available in a timely fashion when needed. It'll help everyone, I say, because it'll help citizens at large, because they'll know what's coming, property owners, developers, planning commissioners, staff planners. It's really a major piece of management that we're missing in South Burlington. And I think we would be very well served if the council were to direct the Planning Commission to work to develop a growth management plan post haste. Any questions?
Could I ask one quick question?
Yes, you certainly may.
Michael, do you have some examples, some municipalities that have such a plan?
Oh, yeah. The nearest one is Williston. And yeah, there are others, but that's if you want something close by where you can go.
No, I have no questions. I mean, I think it's an important addition to the city. I think the school superintendent didn't we sort of had a conversation with them about sort of understanding that growth and its impact on schools. I certainly remember distinctly that once the CHT building was built on Market Street, there was surprise by the superintendent and the school board that there were 12 new students at Marquette Central School as a result of that building, and that was a real issue for them. And it seems to me those are the kinds of impacts that would be important to know ahead of time and not have it appear as if, the city is not cognizant of the impacts of growth on the schools, which we're now struggling with trying to figure out how big they need to be
And how we're going to pay.
and how we're going to pay for that. with that, and we still, have lots of housing in the pipeline. So looking really long term. Right. Well, yes, and we had, several proposals that did not get funded or get accepted by either the school board or the public for meeting the demand. So I think that kind of growth management plan makes a lot of sense in my mind as we move forward. And I have personally mentioned quite a few times that we should really think about staffing for the city as we, grow and grow. Do we have enough firefighters or, police officers or planning staff or road crews or all sorts of individuals that provide the services that I think our community is desirous of.
On this that I was going to speak to in the next agenda item, would it make sense to bring that forward a little bit, that point?
The municipal plan adoption report. Well, we're in a public hearing on the city plan, so we probably, when we,
It's fine. It went to this growth management plan question, but I could address it when we get to the next agenda item.
why don't you do that? And we'll stick to what is in the city plan for public comment. I think that would be a little cleaner.
Well, given our discussion of Michael's idea, I just wanted to ask with regard to Linda's suggestion, is our emergency management plan something that would help us respond to a heat wave that could prove deadly to some of our residents? Is that something that would be included in that?
It's much more of an all hazards plan, so it's at a very high level. It does not provide specifics for that type of perhaps some of the things you may be thinking about. It would talk about sheltering, which would be a cooling station, but they're never the plan is not in that granular.
Right, but could it be used to respond to life-threatening circumstances such as high heat and high humidity?
I think we look at it as an overall emergency operations and management plan of the city for all hazards. Mm-hmm. So I think if I understand where you're asking, it certainly would be used as a management tool.
Okay.
Michael, you need to say something else?
I just need to remind you that in City Plan 24, we do say that all city facilities can be used as shelters when necessary. Mm-hmm. So they're available. It's in the plan. Perhaps what's not done is communicating that to the citizens of mm-hmm. South Burlington.
Well, there's also the goal of putting more heat pumps into properties, which is a way to cool homes as well. Right. Is that something she wants to respond to?
Hi, Linda Bailey again. I do see in there that you have goals of like electrifying, I think it's something like 650 houses a year and things like that. In the action part of it, I saw things like telling neighbors that it's a good idea to do that, saying that there's state and federal type of grants for it, but I don't see anything that the city's actually doing to help households put in a heat pump. Mm-hmm. Those are very expensive. I know through most of my life, certainly when I was raising my kids, I did not have the thousands of dollars that even after grants it costs. So does the city have anything planned to help with that? Is that something you're going to use some of the ARPA money for or something like that?
Well, I think it's always hard to, at this point, you have a plan and then you have to work on funding for different parts of it. So that's possibly a solution, a partial solution, and I think that can be explored either with grants or just the conversation about, do we want to spend general fund dollars to support homes for to install heat pumps. But I think it is unrealistic, I think, to have our city plan include, millions of dollars of expenditures. Well, I think that's what we hope the new individual will hire if the budget passes, to really focus on that. Because I think we've identified that that's a real need, that this is a very costly undertaking, worldwide, countrywide, statewide, community-wide, and we'll need to partner and find some of those resources. But the current staffing doesn't have the time to do that, really. So to make this a real working document, we've decided to use some money to support that kind of staffing, so we can make some specific proposals and steps. Tim?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as different homes age and their heating system becomes so old it has to be replaced, that's an opportunity to switch to a heat pump. In which case, then you get AC as well, where before if you didn't have it, you would have it then with a heat pump. But that's a pretty substantial investment. But when your heating system is at the end of its life and it's time to replace it, at that point in the future years, who knows what the federal state rebates will be, and if it will be as competitive as something less. But you get 2 for 1 if you didn't have one at that point. If you didn't have two. So.
Okay. Vince?
Yeah, Vince Bolduc. I'm very interested in the concept of planning for growth. It's hard to be against that, but let me just say, while we're talking about it and thinking about it, by far the hardest part of growth to plan for is for population growth. You can plan for housing, you can plan roads, and the organization, but controlling for population is something else, because when we try to control for population, we're controlling, we necessarily have to deal with the 3 components of population growth, and that's birth, death, and migration. And I know through housing and zoning, we try to control for immigration, but we can't do it perfectly. I just read in Digger, as most of you probably did too, about the intentions of bringing more refugees into the Colchester area, which would mean us. And it's a federal, international, intention. So, I mean, we can, housing, we can control better, but if we think about controlling for births and deaths, we just can't do it. It wasn't until 1969, just a tiny bit of history, that the United States came up with a population goal commission run by Rockefeller and asked for by President Nixon. And boy, was that a can of worms, because they knew, now we're talking about births, deaths, and migration.
ZPG, right?
Oh, gosh, it was difficult. Anyway, that's not what I came up to say, but I certainly can understand why the plan can't focus on that much. It's too complicated. It's too fraught with so many things. I think it's a nice plan. That's what I came to say. I know people have worked on it hard, and to that, nothing to take away. It's a nice job. There's only one sentence that I think I've written to you about before, and I'm so disappointed to see it's still in here. I think it's hyperbole. It reads like an ideological manifesto, and it's a put-off to the whole rest of the plan, which is very good. And it's this one sentence that, if I'm not mistaken, came from a planning commission meeting, which I was at. And it's the sentence. You may know that it's a real tender point of contention. The overriding guiding principle of this plan is to make every policy decision through the lens of climate resistance and reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. I think that's hyperbole. I mean, of course, it's the most important existential threat facing us today, and we have to deal with it. But is it true that this plan makes every policy decision through this lens? That's just an overstatement. And anyway, maybe I'm the only one, but it sure strikes me as a real put off to the whole plan.
which is so rational. Well, for example, Affordable Housing Committee, I know some of you went to that meeting where we took input from the public. We had 30 or 40 people at that meeting. Excellent points were made. And it was all designed for the purpose of giving input into the city plan. And I don't believe one person mentioned this. So can we now say that that's what we did? I just don't think so. Anyway, that's my only point. I think it compromises the integrity of another otherwise very good document. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and Mike, to distinguish. Mike at the mic.
It's a great name. And my compliments to the flannels in the audience. Just another, maybe it's humorous to some people, but Mike Tyson once said that everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And how does that relate to what we're talking about here? Well, we have to be prepared to adapt, even if you've got a plan. And hopefully a plan won't be used as a mechanism to limit what does want to happen organically. Because, if you look around, you see what is happening organically in this part of the state. Which has a university, a medical center, which has large employers, which has services. And there's a reason why people are coming into Chittenden County. The rest of the state, not so much, but they are coming here. And we received, the opportunity to be one of 30 or 31 tech hubs in the country, with millions and millions of dollars that may flood into the area for the development of new technology and consequently new jobs if they succeed. And, that is going to encourage some additional growth too. So we should plan as best as we can. But if we enjoy the good fortune of finding growth that's resilient and sustainable and environmentally good, then I think we should be prepared to adapt for it. So likewise, this is not the key reason why I came here. I'd like to echo what Vince Bolduc had to say about this statement in the introduction about all or every one of our policy decisions being made through the lens of climate resilience. We don't need a statement like this in here, and I would go even a step further than Vince. Allowing for this statement to remain in here is a license for people to really get carried away with their decision making and their reliance on this as an overriding principle. I can see this being a foundation for more changes in zoning that would reduce housing unless it happens to be located around Market Street or Route 7, Shelburne Road or Williston Road. I can change it. I can see it being a reason where applications for housing development are denied. I can see it, and this may sound like a stretch, but we have events in the city, and you know, how do you get to an event? You get in a car. I can see it. I can see the rationalization being made where we want to discourage events or social activity that is going to attract crowds because of this. So there's not a good reason for this to be in here. Our South Burlington Business Association submitted a letter Tuesday, January 2nd, that basically was a nice way of saying that this statement shouldn't be in here. It's already in your possession. I don't need to burden you with reading it. It's a good-sized paragraph. But it's a nice way of saying, please don't put this in here. The climate action plan that is made reference around this matter, and I forget if it's actually the plan, but a couple of months ago, there was a meeting and something was going to be adopted. Was that the climate action plan, or
Did adopt a climate action plan.
okay,
That was
is this something that was pretty recent, though? I mean, I know there was a plan developed, but was it only adopted?
In October
Okay, so close
of
enough.
22. Oh, that was a while ago. Yeah,
Yeah. So,
a couple of months.
so I think the plan is great. I think all the work, the time and effort that went into developing the plan, I thought the report was impressive. So lots of good work. But South Burlington seems to be pursuing their agenda and their efforts really without inviting more collaboration from our partners, from our community partners in the area. That plan, I offered a couple of comments. One being that why weren't our fellow communities solicited or invited to provide feedback on the development of our own plan? It would seem reasonable because any action that we take is really going to have minimal impact unless it's leveraged with the impacts of others that are around us. And that plan, the folks, who were responsible for its development, there was a notable absence in the room of those who were participating in that process. And it's the normal absence that occurs. There weren't renters. There weren't folks of low economic reach. The same folks who were always outside of the room in the decision-making processes were outside of the room. And again, I think that there was a lot of good effort and a lot of good outcomes with that. But it just seems to me, why wasn't that stakeholder group invited to participate in this process? Because if you talk about lenses, they would see things through a very different lens than lots of the other folks who represent the establishment status quo, seeing what's going on there. So, this has kind of come and gone, but I would really encourage that as we develop initiatives and strategies to address global warming and any other significant matter, that we really commit ourselves to attempting to collaborate more with our partners and make sure that everybody's in the room when these conversations are occurring, not just, the folks that represent the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you. I
Go ahead.
you may go.
Oh, I was just going to say that the Affordable Housing Committee sponsored meeting was a meeting, Mike, where a lot of the people in attendance were from the CHT building, and many of them spoke up about our environment, in fact, and were very concerned that the trees that were outside of their windows were going down, that they were very concerned about the natural resources in this part of the city that were not being preserved and protected. So I think that, and they were quite vocal about that. So, I think we just need to be careful when we think about what they might say, because they were quite eloquent about it. And I just wanted to say, in response to the email that we received from the SBBA, except for that one line, everything else that was in that email is in this plan.
Exactly.
So I think that that's something important to say too.
I just want to say a couple words. So I appreciate your feedback, but I just have to say that change is hard. And we have to accept that we have to change our behavior. How do we do that? What's the problem? How do we keep it in scope so that future decisions that we make will try to make things, well, if not better, if at least not worse? That's the important thing. Don't make things worse. And so if you're worried about these changes, just look at what we've accomplished so far. We passed LDRs that protect wide swaths of the southeast quadrant to preserve those natural areas, which are important for climate change resiliency, important for keeping water supplies pure when they run into Lake Champlain. And we also passed some ordinances about commercial heating and cooling. So what happened? I mean, this is even before that. Tom Getz and the Summit Properties, those two buildings are completely electric for heating and cooling. O'Brien Hillside Farm, it's all electric. There's no natural gas there. This is the future. This is where we're going. These are the decisions we have to make, and this is how we do it, is by that one sentence. And I grant you that it can be difficult at times, and we're not going to make every goal that we wrote down in that plan, but you got to have a goal and you got to start somewhere. And at least if you point towards it, you might actually get to some, success. So, and just like Megan said, all the other sentences in Matt Coda's letter are still in the plan, right? Beta built the 640,000 square foot factory, right? They've got solar panels covering that entire roof. Kyle's trying to make that thing as carbon neutral as he possibly can. He sees the future, and it's in the electric airplane itself. So don't talk to us that it's too strict, that lens is too tightly focused. Because everything that we have to do should be through that lens, and you're going to be upset about some things, and some things aren't going to be a problem at all. But like when we talk about buying a new police car, well, it should at least be a hybrid police car, because like the chief said earlier, if they have to leave it running, it'll shut off, and then with the battery gets low, it'll turn back on again because it's a hybrid. But the bottom line is that that police car uses at least 20-25% less gas when it's running or when it's idling. That's success. That's an improvement. And someday we'll have an electric police car that meets the department's needs, right? And it won't create any carbon dioxide. And bit by bit, a lawnmower for public works, right? We want to put money out, from ARPA to buy a lawnmower that's all electric. It's just little things like that, right? How can we burn fewer fossil fuels? How can we do that? I'm done. Thank you. Was that passionate enough?
Can I make a quick comment, Helen? Not to
Yes, you
belabor
may.
this, but look, I agree obviously with everything that's been said. And to me, the real importance of the statement is for our kids. I read a report recently that I think 71% of kids across the United States are scared for their future and anxious because of climate change. And how can we not do this for our children and do everything that we can to give them some sense of hope? And to me, that's what that sentence is about, showing it to the kids and showing we're trying. We're really trying the best we can.
And to their point, our kids want to have jobs. Our kids don't want to be unemployed, right? So I think, we have to hit both goals, and it's not going to be perfect in either case.
Vince, you wanted to have a response? And then is there anyone else who wants to make a comment from the public? And no one has joined us online, so, okay. It's just you
There
guys.
are people online that are just not indicating they want to speak.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just don't want to be misunderstood on this. I mean, I agree completely on the steps that we're taking to do this and the importance of climate change and little steps, and change is difficult, and we've got to do all of those things. The implication of some of the disagreement, Andrew and Tim, is that I'm, or maybe you mean Mike too, are insensitive to that. And we want to burn more fossil fuel. We want to destroy the world. That's ridiculous. No, I know you don't mean that. Because we're on the same side. It's just the phrasing of the sentence. Everything has to be done that way. And that's just wrong. We should do as many things as we possibly can. And, you know, where we have anything that is related to it, we should do the right thing for the environment, for our kids. And I mean, no one's disagreeing with that.
But
right?
Vince, that's how I think a lens works. It isn't a tunnel vision. It is another factor.
Yeah.
And just like we have a budget, and so
Sure.
you look at things on what you can afford and what you can't, and you make those decisions. But we're asking that one of the considerations be through this lens of climate change and resilience, and if it's possible. If I mean, you know, we could say, we're not saying the next fire truck we buy has to be electric, because it's not there yet.
Yeah,
So
no, I agree with all of that, and I see that. To use the police car example, yes, that's what we should do with the police cars, exactly as you're doing, and the fire engines, and, you know, everything we possibly can. We've really got to do it, and I agree completely. But not whether or not the fire department has to go out to a fire.
Right.
You know, not whether or not the police should go out and, you know, and visit a alleged crime scene. This says every decision has to be about climate change. If the decision were every decision, then the fire department wouldn't go out. The police wouldn't go out.
It says while.
Am I misunderstanding this?
Well, it says while recognizing other important goals in our diverse community. So that's in the same sentence.
It makes that seem secondary, and the primary goal is to preserve the climate.
It's not an ordinance. It's an aspirational city plan, right? And if you didn't remember, we struck the first paragraph that was in red. That's gone, right?
Okay.
yes,
And if you remember that paragraph, then I would tend to agree with what you're saying.
Yeah,
But
that was
what
worse.
we retained is that sentence, and that was acceptable. to
Okay,
us.
yeah, this is better. This is better. Okay, well, we both made our points.
okay. Thank you.
Just as a reminder, this is a public hearing.
Yes, this isn't a dialogue. Okay. Is there any additional suggestions? Different, or is it just an elongation of the conversation, Michael?
6 words.
That doesn't answer my question, does it? Okay.
I think it's something that needs to be said again.
Well, but it's already been said. Correct?
But I'm thirsting to know what those 6 words
Yeah. Well, you two can have a conversation out in the hall, okay? Are there any other comments people would like to make on the plan, the city plan? Okay. Any other concerns or comments from the city council?
I did want to refer to the guiding principles. I see the sentences in the introductory paragraph, but I think what really is the focus of the entire plan is the 4 guiding principles. And I think without having a clear understanding of climate work, the other principles aren't going to, it's not going to matter. So I'm, for my own sake, and I appreciate what you're saying, Vince, but I think that we could look at it as the whole, as opposed to that particular focus.
And I take your point. And so the reason why I am having a dialogue is I'm searching a way to reach some kind of consensus. And I think, you know, I take your point with every policy decision. Could there be the word focus? The overriding guiding principle of this plan is to focus on climate resilience and reduction in greenhouse gas emissions while recognizing other important goals in our diverse community. Because it's there. When you focus on it, it is there. And it's another, I think it's a synonym to look through the lens of, but it might be less offensive. If it could be less offensive, I guess that would be a good outcome of any kind of change.
Paul, you sat through all the planning commission conversations. What do you think about using the word focus as a consensus?
I just want to note,
Oh,
sorry,
yeah.
Jessica Luiso, the planning commission chair, is also online. I didn't know if you'd seen
Oh, okay. Does she want to speak?
She hasn't indicated so, but
Well, if she would like
as the
to,
chair,
yeah,
Ms.
as the chair, I
Paul,
did. I
speaking on behalf
just
of the
didn't know
planning
if she was on.
commission. Oh, there she is.
There she is. Okay. So, do you want to respond to that, Jessica? I know this was wordsmithed and discussed
It
in
was.
great depth.
And, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. So it was a big discussion. We did land on the language that you see there. And, I think you've all made a lot of really good points and, including the audience members, I think that there are some decisions that may or may not need the lens of climate change because they're, I think Vince's point about like, you're going to respond to an emergency call.
Right.
But I think what we wound up coming down to is that, when you're doing decision making about new equipment or like, it seemed reasonable to have the language as written. Many different parts of the plan are aspirational, and it felt like an important point to put out there, as kind of a guiding principle right out front. So,
Okay.
I mean, you can change the wording if you feel like it's really important, because I think what Megan's saying is like it's a synonym, but probably won't change the meaning of the plan all that much if you change one word or the other.
Okay. Paul, do you want to add anything? Paul Connor?
I don't know that I have anything to add other than to say that you do have a few days to chew on this if you want, because your hearing will be continue to next Monday, so decisions should be made at that time for you. So you can chew on it, and if you want us to chew on it a little bit also and think about that, we're happy to do that.
Well, does someone on the council want to chew and come up with a new sentence, or are we? Do we find the planning commission's recommendations acceptable?
I'm willing to change to focus if that's a consensus builder. If it's not, then I'll remove my suggestion.
Where would you put
Principle
that?
to focus, is that what it is? Or the
So
suggestion?
the overriding guiding principle of this plan is to focus on climate resilience and reduction in greenhouse gas emissions while recognizing other important goals in our diverse community.
Okay. Michael? Oops, sorry.
As Michael comes up, can I just make a process
Yep,
suggestion?
you
So
may.
as just underline what Paul just said, you should not vote on any
Right.
changes tonight.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You should continue your hearing, close your hearing, and then if you want to make changes, you can do that after the hearing on the 8th, and then you'll need to warn another public hearing.
Okay.
Uh,
All right.
Michael Mittag again. I'd like to remind everybody that this is policy guidance. It doesn't lay down the law that you have to do this with every single decision. It's aspirational, and I'm sorry to say, Councillor Emery, that your wording waters it down and changes the meaning completely, because there's a lot of focus on climate change throughout this plan.
Mm-hmm.
That statement is in there to send a message to everybody, to alert everybody that this is, as Vince said, climate change is an existential threat to us. But to repeat what Andrew Chalnick said, it's also something more so for our children, and to give them hope and to indicate to the world that we are doing something. So watering it down is a really bad idea. I think we should stick with what we have. It doesn't mean that, as Mike at the mic said, you have to do every single thing with that in mind, but it is a mindset
Well,
that
then,
that people need to have when they are thinking about policy and changes. Keep that in the back of your mind.
I
So
didn't see it as watering
don't change it.
down. Yeah, I understand. But I think it's the every that is sticking. And I can live with this. I just want
Yeah.
us to come to some kind of, well, agreement, I guess. Yeah.
So this is a recommendation. We
Yeah.
take it in under advisement. We'll have another public hearing. We may get some additional feedback.
Yeah.
That will help us make a decision whether to make any changes, recommend any changes, or stay with what we have. Are there any other comments from the public? Seeing or hearing none, I would entertain a motion to close this public hearing. Oh,
Continue.
no,
Continue.
to continue this public hearing to, what's the date?
January 8th,
Is it 8th?
Yeah.
7? Is it 6?
No, it's the 8th.
8th. Thank you.
So I'll move that we continue this public hearing to January 8th.
Second.
At
7
7 p.m.
Oh, it's at 7. Great.
Pardon?
That the public hearing's at 7.
Yeah, the public hearing at 7.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, there's a second?
I had a second. Yep.
Okay,
Can you just
yes.
pause for one quick second?
I'm pausing for one climate-focused moment.
The public hearing, we have currently warned the public hearing for January 8th at 6:30 p.m.
Oh, at
Okay, so I
6:30.
withdraw
Okay.
my motion. I move that we continue the public hearing on January 8th at 6:30 p.m.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. So we'll continue this discussion on the 8th. Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So now we can move on to 8. Item 8, discuss the Planning Commission's municipal plan adoption report. And this was a request by Councilor Chalnick. It was related to some of the conversation that we just had.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. Yeah, it just struck me that we received this report, I don't know, a few months ago and didn't really discuss it. And I was, or maybe I missed it. I'm sorry if I did. As I was rereading it, there are a couple of points that I think merit some discussion. So let me start with one, and it relates to the earlier discussion we had. So I think it could be short. So the state of Vermont, the statute says that the plan in our adoption report needs to consider whether and does the rate of growth exceed the ability of the community and the area to provide facilities and services, including schools. And it's not really clear to me how the adoption report, addresses that consideration. There's some cross references. I don't really see how it does. I don't really see how the plan does. I'm not really suggesting changes to the plan, but I think the fact that the statute requires us to, consider our rate of growth really makes it incumbent upon us, and echoing Michael and echoing you, Helen, to consider some kind of growth management plan, maybe taking inspiration from Williston. And if there's anyone from the school or school board online listening, I'd love some feedback from the school board as to whether, the school thinks that our rate of growth is consistent with an orderly plan for providing educational services, because it strikes me that it's really hard to, plan for infrastructure without knowing, right, how many units are going to be coming online. And if it's just, sporadic and you don't know what's coming, how can you really plan? So I'd really love us to leverage that direction from the state to give some serious consideration to, a growth management plan. So that's kind of point one. Point two, there's a statement in the report, which is in response to another statutory instruction that we consider resulting increase in traffic from changes in land use. And the report says that the proposed patterns of development are not in most cases anticipated, or are anticipated in most cases to reduce vehicle traffic. So it says proposed patterns of development are in most cases anticipated to reduce vehicular traffic. And this may be just words, but I don't understand that statement. It's just not really clear to me how, if you have new residents in the city who are going to drive some and take some trips by car, how having new development is going to reduce traffic. I could see having new development in the right places may proportionally reduce how much new traffic you have compared to how much you would have otherwise had. But I just don't see how we can say, like, as an absolute matter, that the proposed patterns are in most cases anticipated to reduce vehicular traffic. I don't really understand that. Jessica, maybe you could speak to that. Maybe what the report meant to say that was with the other strategies contemplated by the plan, like transportation demand management, build out a bike ped, increase managed transit, et cetera, that overall traffic in the city is expected to be reduced. But again, I don't see how you can say, adding new residents is anticipated to reduce vehicular traffic. So yeah, those are my 2 points.
Jessica or Paul, do you want to respond?
Yeah, sure. And I think Paul might be, I was just like making sure I could see the spot. So I think one of the big points of that particular section that's talking about traffic is that it's comparing basically the currently adopted land use map to the proposed land use map that's in the plan. So it's, I think, a statement that's kind of focused on like, how are we changing the proposed patterns of what our current future land use map to our changed future land use map. So it's actually, it's not necessarily saying what is the exact existing amount of development and how might the future land use plan change it. So it's kind of a nuanced discussion because like our existing future land use map already contemplates certain levels of or intensities of development in different areas of the city. So it's almost assuming that that's the baseline, and the change in traffic is talking about like how, the change between those two maps might work. So, and when we were evaluating the changes, we're actually taking into consideration not only traffic, but also like how all of our other goals are going to be affecting transportation, like, increasing the walkability, bike paths, and therefore reducing traffic, and also working to implement some of the other strategies in the plan about overall reductions of vehicle miles traveled. So it's not only looking at what's on the map, but also kind of combining in some of those other goals that we're going to be working on in tandem. So it's, I think you're right, Andrew. It's a little bit of like a nuanced like statement to just kind of take out of the context of all of that. And I don't know, Paul, if you have some more things to add to that as well.
I
Based
think
on
you
this statute
pretty
there.
much covered it all, Jessica. I guess I would just highlight that the report does speak about what the changes between the 2016 and the 2024 map are. And so there's areas that have been added to the very low scale, principally conservation areas. So that's areas that will likely see no development, like the habitat blocks. It talks about the addition of support services in some of the commercial industrial areas, with the intent being that the supporting services to businesses, whether it's people being able to stay overnight or food, will likely result in people having to drive less to get to and from those places. And so as a comparison, there is between the 2016 and 2024 map, that was some of the commission's discussion. And then, as you said, more globally, yes, I think what Councillor Chalnick identified of there is many strategies in this plan, including from the Climate Action Plan, the very specific target of reducing overall vehicle miles traveled 2.5% annually, citywide across the city, including accounting for new developments. So that's sort of incorporated into the big picture of all of the development strategies, whether it's the private sector developing or the public sector developing things like the bike ped bridge over the interstate and seeing changed land use patterns of having neighborhood stores and neighborhood parks and things like that.
Okay. Does that address things?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's worth it to, or if we even can adjust some of these words. I hear both Paul, what you're saying, what Jessica, you're saying. I don't read the statutory mandate that way, and I don't read our answer in the adoption report addressing all those different points. It just kind of reads like a flat statement that development's going to reduce traffic. So to me, it was confusing, but I hear your explanation. I just don't think those explanations are really contained in the report in a clear way.
Okay. Well, we've accepted the letter, or
So the report is the responsibility of the Planning Commission under statute. So if the council wanted the commission to take a second look at it, they could, but the council does not have the authority to change the report.
Okay. Does anyone want them to look at that? The Planning Commission to address this again in their letter? I think I would rather ask them to work on a growth management plan if time is of importance. And to me, that's more important than, this letter that doesn't affect any policy. It's the plan that drives the policy. So the fact that the letter maybe overstates or suggests something that may not be 100% accurate, but it's as Jessica suggested, it's rather nuanced. I don't think I want to ask the Planning Commission to spend time on that.
I would agree.
Okay, but I appreciate you bringing it up, Andrew. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Let's move on to item 9 then. Hold a necessity hearing to consider the construction of an additional water tower on Dorset Street and in, yes.
Are you entertaining comments from the public on agenda item 8?
I wasn't going to. Okay, let's hear one. And then
And one question. Whether the
it's never just one with you, is it?
the question is whether adding relative to population would satisfy Councillor Chalnick's concern with this statement that you were just discussing. My question on the report is on page 180 or page 10 of the report, which is specific goal number 14, where we say that encourage flood resilient communities and areas should be encourage flood resilient communities. New development in an identified flood hazard, fluvial erosion, or river corridor protection area should be avoided. In the text of the plan on page 61 and 62, we say the city has restricted development within wetlands, habitat blocks, river and stream corridor buffers and setbacks and mapped floodplains. Personally, knowing what we know, if you can remember what happened in Houston a few years ago, the death and destruction because people built in floodplains, I would have preferred prohibited. But since we have restricted in the language elsewhere, I think that's what we should do under goal 14. Areas should be restricted if in that goal. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
I would just note, for the audience, that effectively our regulations do prohibit the use of the word restricted is because development is a very wide word, including things like stormwater management. So we do allow for flood resiliency work to take place in our floodplains, but otherwise we are essentially do not allow for any expanded or new development in our 100-year floodplains.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now we are at 9, the necessity hearing,
Do we
or
need
resolution, excuse me.
does there need to be a motion for a necessity hearing
There's a motion at the end, yeah.
to begin? So I move that we begin the necessity hearing to consider the construction of an additional water tower on Dorset Street and an anticipated bond vote on town meeting day.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Tom DiPietro.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Tom DePietro, Director of Public Works. It's good to see you all in the new year. Not at the table with me tonight, but behind me we have a couple folks I want to make you aware of in case you have questions. We have 2 folks from Aldrich and Elliott who are the design engineers for this project. We also have our water superintendent, Jay Nadeau, and the general manager for the Champlain Water District, Joe Duncan, is here. So I've got a variety of folks behind me to help out if we have questions later. But we are here tonight to have the necessity hearing. That's a required step in the process to have a bond vote on town meeting day in this year. If you go to the next slide, Jesse. There are basically 3 things in a resolution that we'll talk about at the end that kind of within that resolution, it must be determined the project in the public interest and necessity demands the improvements. The cost of the improvements will be too great to be paid for out of ordinary annual income, and orders the submission of the proposition to incur bonded debt to pay for the public improvements to the voters on town meeting day. And this particular document, which again we'll talk about the specifics of the legal documents at the end, but this does include reimbursement for some project costs we've incurred to date. And those are all part of statutory requirements, and I've provided that there. So what I was planning to do is give a brief overview of the project. I just wanted to note for folks that this may sound familiar to some. We had a more extensive discussion about the project and the project history back in April. If people were interested in that, there's a link right there. They can go and check that out, where the engineer presented a lot more information about sort of how we got here over time. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to present general kind of what the project is at the moment. But by way of some overview, so how does our water system work? We get our water, our drinking water, from the Champlain Water District. They pull it from the lake, from Shelburne Bay. Water is treated down by Queen City Park Road at their facility. It's pumped up to our storage facilities throughout the city, water tanks, water towers, and then through a city-owned distribution pipe network, distribution system, it's pumped around the city and it reaches everybody's house. And so what we're talking about today is construction of a second tank on Dorset Street. And sort of what does a water tank do generally? It serves 2 basic purposes. The first is just to provide water storage. Typically in a millions of gallons range of water is stored in these towers. Ensures that water is available even in emergency situations, and that we have sufficient flow for things like when there's a large demand on the system for firefighting activities, for example. The tanks also provide water pressure. So the height of the tanks really determines the amount of pressure in the system. And there's a minimum pressure requirement for our system. And if the pressure is too high because the tower is somewhere higher up and somebody's in a lower area, we can modify that with some pressure reducing valves and the like. Next slide. So again, a very brief site history. So the original tank that you see on Dorset Street today, also known as the South Burlington East Tank, was constructed in 1971. It was a 1.5 million gallon tank. In 2003, the voters approved a bond to add storage to the existing tank, so it was raised by 35 feet, and the volume was increased from 1.5 million gallons to 2.1. And some of our operating pressure range were also increased because, again, it's the height of the tower that determines the pressures available. And so that work was done in 2004, which is sort of represents the tank we have there today that you see. And so we have actually two different water tanks, east tanks and the west tanks. The east tank serves the majority of the city, so I know this map is hard to read, but it's the bluer area of the city. I tried to call out some landmarks there for points of reference, but it's basically everything east of Spear Street is where you receive water from the existing tank on Dorset Street, and everything west is another tank. It's called the main service area. And the high service area, you can remember that by kind of the higher elevations of the city, is the high service area.
Is that green the part of Shelburne that we're also servicing?
Yep. So that is fed off of our tanks, and so they have an allocation, which I'll show you in a coming up slide here.
Can you tell us what happened Christmas Day?
I can. Do you want me to do that in the middle of this, or do you want to do that at the end?
At the end.
Okay. I was
Sorry.
saving that for the end, too.
Sorry,
I
I'm
knew it
just
was
like,
going to
I
come
want
up.
to know what happened.
Sure. And I may have Joe explain in better detail.
I'm on a well. It didn't affect me at all.
I don't want to hear about it.
Next slide, please, Jesse. So this should look familiar. This was our current capacity. We calculated this a little while back. It just shows why we're talking about a water tank or a water tower at all. Between what we use on the average day, about 1.4 million gallons, what we allocated to newer projects, the allocation, the portion of it that goes to Shelburne, so they have up to 81,000, the excess storage, and then some fire flow requirements. We've used up basically 98% capacity in that existing tank. So the state has a rule that we need to start looking at this at a certain point and then construct so we have enough water to meet our demands. One note here is that tanks will typically turn over every 3 to 10 days. Our tank's turning over about every day. So as water gets pumped up the hill, it drains down. We have that continuous flow from Champlain Water District that fills the tank.
And the peach color allocated capacity, where does that go?
So as developments get approved, they get an allocation. And so that allocation is basically measured against the volume in the tower. So if you have, a 2-bedroom house or a 5-bedroom house, you need this much water, or a restaurant. There's a chart we use, and we issue those allocations, and we have to track it.
So this is all that's permitted?
Yep, permitted, not built, or under construction. And so every year we go through a process to update that. And so it being the second, we're going to do that very soon. We go back through and update this information.
So when the water in the tank is turning over on a daily basis, when normally it's 2 to 3, that's an indication of needing greater capacity?
That's part of it. Yeah. So we have a good continuous flow of water, right, that comes up right from the water district, which we'll talk about at the end a little bit here, what happened. But generally the water can sit in the tank for 3 to 10 days. That's the design of it. But we're kind of pulling that down. If you go through about every day, we're pulling all the water in, putting it in and pulling it back out of that tank right now in the high service area.
Does that mean that we use more water than most municipalities, or
No, not necessarily.
not abusing that resource?
I wouldn't say so, no. I mean, we could talk about kind of water conservation at the end, I'm sure, if folks were interested. Jay could provide some info on that. So moving forward to the project as proposed. So again, we've got the existing tank. We are planning to construct a tank very similar to the one that's there already. It's 53-foot diameter, about 127 feet high, same capacity. The site we've chosen is well situated. It's at a high point in the city. There's some existing piping there, so that'll be some cost savings for us. The site was originally purchased with the ability to expand in mind. It's already city owned, so it's got a lot of things going for it in the site already. And so impact on the landscapes or the aesthetics of this is something that always comes up, so I wanted to make sure to have a slide on it. So I've just got a photo of the existing tank that was taken recently, and then you may recall from a previous presentation on this, just we put together a simple rendering here in Photoshop or whatever program, just so you can see kind of what the idea would be. We're doing some additional work on kind of the aesthetics and the visual impacts of this as we go through the permitting process. And so that kind of information will be available soon as we get to Act 250 and other permitting processes.
Clearly you did this last year because there's snow in the ground.
That's right. So I want to talk a little bit about project costs. So our project costs have not changed, our estimates at this point, even though we've been through some initial engineering, pretty well on track with what you have seen before. I would say the big difference is since that time, we received a $500,000 grant from the Community Recovery and Revitalization Grant, or CREP, CRRP. We've completed the grant paperwork. I guess at this point, I made this before the vacation break there. So we have that as well to reduce. But you'll see a lot of the math I've done is based on the full amount. I wanted to give you kind of a worst case scenario type analysis here as we go through. But if you go to the next slide. So this is a bit of updated information. Since the last time I was here speaking with you all, we've talked more about the type of loan we could get. So previously we were talking about going through the SRF program, which had about 2% interest rate. The funds are not sufficient in the drinking water SRF program to allow them to give us a loan. So we're going to go get a loan from the bank. The rates are a little different there. So Martha Machar and I have looked at that. And it looks like the best option is a 30-year loan at about a 4.4% interest rate is what we were at, and we did the math a week or two ago. And so that would make our annual payment about $350,000. I've got the calculation there for what that would do to the rates. It would bring our rates up by about $4.82 per 1,000 cubic feet, which would be about an annual increase of $38.66 for the average residential user. And again, just the asterisk there, just to say this represents a worst case scenario. If we don't need the full construction contingency, it'll be less. We do have the $500,000 grant, which will further reduce this overall costs. So this is information from last fiscal year. And again, I've shown this before, but I just wanted to note that right now our rates are some of the lowest in the region, certainly with our neighbors. That hasn't changed. I'm looking forward to doing a new survey here in kind of the new year to figure out where we're at, because I know some other communities are having some fairly large increases in their rates. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how this changes going forward and kind of where we land. A little bit about project schedule. So I think this is generally in line with what we've talked about before. We are currently doing our permitting design work, and we're going to finish all that up in March, and then we're hoping to advertise for bids in summer of this year, and maybe begin construction as early as fall of this year, and finish up kind of within 18 month time period. We may decide to bid a little bit later in the spring for finance related reasons, so we only have to make one loan payment in the fiscal year. That's something Martha and I are also considering. But this represents, I think, the most aggressive schedule that we've been working on so far that we think is still achievable. So that's what I've presented here tonight. Very quickly, just threw a couple of the project benefits up there just to remind everybody. So this will set us up well and provide the city with water well into the foreseeable future. The volume of water, if we build the second tower, will supply us what we need for the next 50 years. It allows us to meet some of our regulatory requirements, whether it is capacity for fighting fires, just having water on hand for our residents and for future development. And provides more water storage in the event of emergency, like a CWD pump or pipe failure, or large water usage for firefighting if something were to happen. We'll talk more about that in a minute. It provides us with some redundancy and ability to complete maintenance. So we would have the ability to take one tank offline, clean it, paint it, address whatever maintenance needs to happen if we have the second tank right next to it. So that's really big benefit operationally. I just want to note the project, because it's not going higher, can't go higher, we're not going to be increasing the pressure beyond what is provided today, but it'll provide some greater operational flexibility so we can keep the water in the tank, right, because it's a 127-foot tank, higher, longer, so it'll be at the higher end of the operating pressure range. So that's also another benefit. So it won't increase the top end, but it'll keep us, we have the ability to be more flexible with where we keep that water and the pressure coming out of the tank.
So is it used kind of evenly?
It would be in this case, yeah. And that's an important benefit of having the same tank side by side. We wouldn't want it to preferentially pull from one, so the water's different age. So it would get designed so that it comes down the same elevation. There'd be some mixing perhaps that happens in there too to ensure it's mixed well and the water's not aging in the tank.
So the tanks would be joined by a common pipe before it flows out to the customers? Is that what you're, but you'd have a valve on each and you could control?
Yeah, so if the exact design of it, I can have Jeff or
later
Jason come down, but generally, yes.
You did have some nods.
That's good. Yeah, I could feel the nods.
A nod, yes. Yeah.
And so I'll get through this last piece, and then we can do lots of Q&A with the folks behind me as well. So what you had included in your packet today, aside from this presentation, was 3 documents. The first is a resolution of necessity for this capital improvement project. And that's what you would need to pass tonight. Then there's the declaration of intent that we talked about earlier. And then some example of the ballot language that will be used on town meeting day. And so the recommended actions and the order of those actions are listed below. I should note, Colin's not here with me, but this was reviewed with the city attorney.
He is online.
Okay. Well, this was reviewed with Colin, the city attorney, and also with outside legal counsel helped us pull this information together. So we've had a number of attorneys looking at it to prepare this for you this evening as well. And that's the end of my presentation. So happy to do some Q&A and bring up some guest speakers as you'd like.
I'm sure Councilor Barrett has a few questions.
Well, so Christmas night, like, okay, I don't use my dishwasher very often because I like to wash my dishes. And so I plugged it in, set it up because we had a lot of people there. And before it even started up, my kids came in and accused me, Dad, what did you do to the water pressure? Why did you decrease the water? Because, like I turned on the thermostat, things like that. And I was like, I didn't do anything. So I called the Lake Champlain Water District office at 8:00 and said, do you know that there's a little problem with the pressure? And they went, yeah, something happened, and they were working on it. So anyway, I saw pictures of big pipes being manipulated in Essex. So it was actually Essex.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask Joe, if you don't mind, you wanted to give the update on what happened on Christmas Day. But yeah, the issue
Some
was
people
actually,
had
well,
no
I don't want to
water.
spoil the story. So
Some people had no water, and some people just had low pressure.
That's right. And so different zones, different subzones within this zone would have lost pressure at different times.
Make sure push the middle button. Yeah,
there we go. Joe Duncan, General Manager, Champlain Water District. Good evening. Happy New Year, everyone. Yeah, I was as surprised as you. I was playing games at home with my kids when all of a sudden I got a call to come in because we dropped pressure at the plant. So I'll jump to the end and then I can fill you in on the in between. So water leaves our plant in 2 large mains going into our high service zone. One is high service 1. It works its way over through Tech Park and over to Muddy Brook area into Williston. That is a main route to sort of feed the Essex area. We have another main that goes out through along 89, past the Public Works building, along Airport Park, across the Limekiln Bridge, and then over to Essex by Woodside. And so basically the way everything works in South Burlington is everything within South Burlington until it goes out a meter is basically part of South Burlington. So technically our meter vault for going out of South Burlington is the Woodside meter vault. Turns out that the line just before the Woodside meter vault broke, we had instability in soils out there that due to the wet weather and everything else, I think it just ultimately kind of shifted enough where we basically came apart. The whole it was a coupling that came apart, and we were losing about 5,000 gallons a minute.
Yikes.
Out of that.
Whoa.
It was a incredible washout of a ravine as a result of that. And so basically what that did is created a giant sucking sound in South Burlington. So water, our plant was trying to keep up with that. What complicated things for South Burlington is that, so at 7:17 on Christmas Day, the break must have occurred because that's when we dug back into it a little bit, we found that's when the Woodside meter vault lost pressure. For some reason, at 7:29, we have different pumps. We have 5 high service pumps that pump out of the plant. Typically, we're running 2 this time of year. So we were running 2 that night. For some reason, high service 1 pump cut out. And we still are trying to figure out why. Usually we get a fault to tell us why. With the holiday, we haven't been able to bring anybody in to figure out why it cut out. But for some reason, that cut out. And when it did, all the water that was keeping the system sort of stable dropped out. And when it did, what we have is we have a bunch of measures within South Burlington that if we ever do lose a pump, not necessarily during a large break at the same time, we have valves that open up throughout the city to try and stabilize the city. So unfortunately, when that reaction mode went in because of the pump going down, we were losing so much water out of there. By the time we got everything back on, to complicate things, as we were looking for the break, a lot of calls were coming from Gregory Drive, coming from the Dorset Street area. So we were, and also too, there was no water going to Williston at that time. So the indication seemed to be that there was something in our transmission main, high service 1 out to South Burlington. We ultimately identified the break as being on Woodside, and when we did, we isolated that, and that's when everything came back to regular pressures. We were able to then, there's nobody on that line. We were able to isolate it behind St. Mike's to where the break was. So we were able to get the repair done without impacting anybody else. So the break actually did occur in the town of Essex. But technically, it's the high service 2 main that gets there. And what happens is, at the meter vault at Woodside, there's a check valve in there. And so what that means, it's intended to be a one-way flow direction. So water can only flow from South Burlington into Essex and not back the other way. And so what happened is there's other ways that water moves throughout think of it as, we can drive to Waterbury by going Route 2, or we can drive to Waterbury by going I-89. And so you've got water that moves throughout the county in different ways. So the Essex area was unaffected because the water couldn't flow back into the giant sucking sound that was just on the other side of that line. And so that's what happened as to why there was a loss of water for South Burlington. I believe that if we didn't have the high service 1 pump go down, we wouldn't be talking about, we'd be talking about a break, but we wouldn't be talking about a loss of pressure throughout South Burlington. It was a very odd coincidence, one that we're trying to get to the bottom of.
Sorry, it was on Christmas Day. Was our wastewater break 5,000 gallons a minute or whatever? No. Okay, good.
Well, that's good. Oh.
I just have one other comment. The water tank is a great hygrometer in the summertime. You drive by, if you can judge the humidity by the amount of sweating in the tank, and you can also see what the water level is because you can see how much of it's covered in moisture. So that's cool.
Gosh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Studied it.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. And
He's an engineer.
Are there any other grants you're going to apply for besides the one you got?
We're certainly keeping an eye out. We did apply for some others, but at the moment I don't have any applications out. But we're always looking.
And is the construction going to be any different than the other tank? The method or the materials or the coatings or anything like that? I'm just curious.
Same materials. As far as construction methods and how they're going to erect the tower, I could have Jason or Jeff join and explain that. But it's going to be the same materials. And maybe Joe,
Yeah, it'll be the same. It'll be the same materials, the same metal. There is a slight difference in that. So we own the South Burlington. Champlain Water District owns the South Burlington East Tank. The process is that if a municipality needs additional storage, they construct it. If they construct it to Champlain Water District standards, Champlain Water District takes it over and then maintains it for the life of the tank. There's a change in the regulations for the type of interior coating that needs to go on. There's a higher standard for carcinogens and other things that are in paint that they've eliminated a lot of that. So you have to go to epoxy based paint. So the interior will be an epoxy based paint that I think we're in like 3 or 4 years, we're going to be doing that to the existing tank.
Oh, so you'll repaint the existing one?
Yes.
When
Yep.
it's with the newer. That's good.
Yep. When that time is due. So,
because you just worked on the other tank in 2017, right after the tower was
yes.
erected, or 18?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We did the exterior on that one. So it'll be a twin.
Do you have a question?
No.
Oh. Any other questions? Andrew? Okay.
Tim, I don't know. You had a question on the hydraulics of the tank.
Well, you've got these
earlier.
two tanks and they're going to get filled and they're going to drain. Are they going to drain into the same pipe and then the pipe goes to whatever the rest of the network is? Or?
Correct. Yes. So what'll happen is the same. It'll have one feed line that comes up off of Dorset Street. That will then split into 2 lines going into each separate tank. There'll be valving on that, so you can isolate one tank over another. But generally, they'll both be wide open. Same thing with the outlet pipes. There'll be an individual outlet pipe for each tank.
Yeah.
They will come together and both go over to.
Will they have
Dorset
check
Street.
valves against each other so they can't flow back into each other?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Correct.
So they could maintain different heights at any time if they wanted to.
No,
because then they wouldn't flow.
They'll flow together on the inlet
Okay.
together.
Okay.
So
This is really analogous to electricity at Green Mountain Power's, power
Yeah.
network and their sources of power. It's really interesting.
it's very similar. The only difference is you're when things are open, things are closed, things are closed, things are
You
open.
got
Other than that,
voltage
water and electricity
nodes,
are the same thing.
and sources, and then, consumption and
And you'll
drains,
be able to
resistors.
drive by and see
You
the condensation and be able to call and
Got
say,
resistors
one
and
of them looks a
capacitors.
little
I'm telling you,
lower.
you're blowing my mind.
Hopefully they'll be exactly equal at their base, so Tim won't be calling you to say there's something wrong, at least in the summer.
Water is self-leveling, so you'll see the same.
Any other questions, more information you have to share with us, or can we move on
That's it, unless we have
to?
questions. So just a couple of actions on that
Right,
last
yeah.
slide for council to adopt the resolution and then adopt the declaration of intent.
Okay.
Do you want the motions?
Yes, I'm ready for them if everyone else is.
Yeah.
So I would move that we adopt the resolution of necessity for capital improvement project for the extra tank being built on Dorset Street.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I heard another aye. Yeah.
Yep,
And
that
so
was
now I will
unanimous.
move to adopt the declaration of official intent of the city of South Burlington to reimburse certain expenditures from proceeds of indebtedness.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That was unanimous, that passes? That's it, right?
And then we do see the warning. We're going to pass that though in January, right? Or I think we are January, but.
You can approve the warning language tonight. It will also be on the warning that we bring you on the 16th.
The 16th, yeah.
Colin, is that, do you want to?
Is that okay?
Sure, yeah, I mean, we just wanted to include the warning language for this ballot item with the necessity resolution. You will see the full warning later on.
Okay,
And you've already approved it with adopting the necessity resolution.
Oh, perfect.
okay, good. All right, well, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you all.
You've been busy, Tom, with different breaks, right?
We've been pretty busy. Yeah, we had a
Not,
busy
and
holiday
not
season.
a,
So
yeah, vacation break.
Right.
Okay, item 10. Oh, that's what we just did, excuse me. Item 11, first reading of a complete update of the municipal code of ordinances for form and consider setting a public hearing for February 5th, 2024 at 7 p.m.
So Colin, I think, is going to mostly do this one, but I just want to acknowledge that our city clerk, Holly, is here as well, as is our city attorney, Colin. This is an effort that has been underway for a decade, and it is a huge modernization improvement, and so much credit to Colin and Holly and Donna for getting this across the finish line.
Yeah.
I can remember when we first talked about this.
So thank you all. This has been a project that's been a long time undertaking. In talking to Donna Kinville about it, I think she was trying to get the money to support this project from Chuck Hafner and the city council at that time, probably in the 2009, 2008 range. And then ultimately we were able to enter into a contract with Unicode back in 2013. And since then, through the work of Donna and City Attorney Jim Barlow, City Attorney Andrew Baldock, and now current staff, we have a project that's resulted in this code of ordinances that's before you. So the goal here was really to kind of modernize the collection of our ordinances. So for public access and for ease of updating. What we know is that most municipalities in the United States have their ordinances online, and we have them online to a degree, but not organized like what we will have if you're successful in approving this codification, this city code. Currently, we have 3 books in our land records full of city ordinances. So when a new one passes, it just goes to the front of the book. And it's very difficult to tell exactly what are the current ordinances from old ordinances, because the old ordinances are all in the book as well. So here will be a resource where people can look at and see our current ordinances. And we will also be able to routinely update those ordinances whenever you pass something new or make an amendment to an ordinance. So it'll really be a helpful tool to just make sure that the public is aware of our current ordinances and allow the public to see what our ordinances actually are. So it's taken a lot of work to get here, but here we are. There's just a couple different, very small things that we've noticed since we received this. For instance, I think we'll have to replace, when this was put together, Tyler Barnes was a city councilor. He's obviously no longer a city councilor. There he is. So we'll have to replace a name there. We also have to update the charter. The charter that was used when this was put together, the state legislature actually updated our charter for us, kind of unbeknownst to us, and just corrected it for genders. And so we have to make sure that the current charter is included in this, and we will make sure both of these are in place for the public hearing. But essentially, what we're asking you to do is if you have any comments, essentially consider this a first reading of this, and set it for a public hearing. And in the meantime, we'll publish it as required in the other paper, and have it ready to go for the public hearing.
Okay, are there any questions?
Well, he answered one of mine. The other one was the reserved. Are the reserves for future ordinances? Is that why we have so
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. What they tried to do is just have room in, not necessarily the online version that we're going to have, but we have 4 hard copy books with different folders separating different categories of ordinances out. And they just wanted to leave some room in there for when we pass some new ordinances.
Colin, will you be able to show us and the public how to access the ordinance online? Will you have a way to show that?
Sure, we will. We don't have it right now. I think what will happen is as soon as you pass this enacting ordinance, which is included in your packet here. It's a 2-page ordinance that it essentially says that you adopt this as your city code, and ordinances not included in this are repealed, essentially. Once that's passed and the city code becomes our city code, we contact MuniCode and say we're good to go. And within 2 or 3 days of that, it'll be online and there'll be a way to access it from our website.
Okay.
Can I just add a statement to that? Agree with everything Colin just said. As Colin mentioned, this is a company that does this nationwide. So the city of Burlington, for example, uses this system. So if you want to go on and look at what the technology looks like, you can look at the Burlington code. Obviously, our code is different, but the organizational structure and how you search the code, you could get a sense of there.
So this company helped to restructure and then make it available on the web, and then
Yeah,
also makes it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so they did a lot of work helping us, and what they did is we supplied them with our ordinances, and they really helped us organize them. They put them into sections that were more easy to follow, in categories that made the code alphabetical, and in ways that were put like ordinances with like ordinances. They also, helped us delete duplicate language, and really clean and without making substantive changes, clean up the ordinance so they can appear easier and more user friendly. One of the things they did that you'll notice if you look at an ordinance and then compare it to what's in this code is the penalty provisions of ordinances. We now just have a penalty section for the whole code instead of each ordinance having its own penalty section. Most ordinances retain like a waiver penalty, but the actual penalty section is now referred to in one place.
Other questions? Andrew?
Can you hear me?
We can't hear you.
No, we can barely hear you. Use your big boy voice.
Hold on. Is that better?
That's much better. Yes.
Hold on. Hold on. Okay.
We
No,
can hear
we
you
can
fine,
hear you.
Andrew.
You can't hear us?
Yeah.
Oh, you can hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, good. I'm just curious, Colin. Thank you for all the hard work. I actually skimmed / read most of it. It's actually an impressive set of ordinances. But I was wondering, as you went through it with a careful eye, whether there's anything you saw that's kind of, is odd or unusual or a relic, like, not really policy, but things that you saw that like, oh, that's something we should look at and maybe fix.
I think there's several that are in the works. I think Tom could talk to like our stormwater and our water ordinances that are about to be updated anyway. We're working on projects for those. We've been working for a long time on updating our sign ordinance. There's been some change in law there. And so what we essentially did is didn't make any modifications to that ordinance this time, but that's going to need a pretty significant rewrite, and we're working on that right now.
I noticed that about half the code related to signs, there's a lot there about signs.
Yeah. And I think now that we have them in front of us, I mean, there were some ordinances that I don't think have been looked at for quite some time. That now that we have them in front of us, we'll have the opportunity to kind of take a look at what we do have and see if they do need updating.
Did they also, as I understand it, they went through the 3 books, some of which had been changed, but they were still in the books, old ordinances or old language. Did that old language get saved somewhere, and is it online so one could, if they want, I don't know who would. I'm not interested, but someone might be, to go back over the history of I don't know, noise ordinances in South Burlington and how they've changed. Is that possible?
Yeah, at this point, we have no intention of getting rid of the ordinance books that we do have for historical perspective. And I think we'll have to figure out a way to keep ordinances when they do change, so we can maintain that historical perspective, so we can tell how we got from point A to point B. I think that is often helpful. And I think one thing we did do is, we had to go through these ordinances and see, okay, what is in effect and what isn't. So some things we thought were in effect that the city council had repealed back in 1973. And so we had to review minutes and think, oh, wait, the council did repeal that ordinance. We don't need to include that one.
Yeah, it's been a lot of work.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a real lot of work.
Huge improvement.
That's great. Well, I thought it seemed pretty well organized too.
Yeah.
I didn't read it word for word. I skimmed.
Oh.
Yeah, but
600
I was
pages? How
interested
many
in
was
the
it?
organizational pieces, and I liked how they were identifying where the different information came with those little codes and stuff. It just looked like it really was very usable for someone who really wanted to dig into and understand an ordinance.
Yeah, and search and do searches on. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, kudos. Thank you.
So if you are willing to move it forward, we do need a motion. I have motion language here.
You do? Oh, I like motion language.
Tim's good at that.
He is.
I try.
We'll have our little roles.
So this is the motion here. So I would move to approve the included enacting ordinance and the proposed city code and set a second reading and public hearing for February 5th, 2024 at 7 p.m. in accordance with the requirements of the city charter.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, that passes. Larry was out of the room.
Yeah.
Oh, here he is.
Oh.
That's okay. Do you want to cast your vote on this
Unicode?
the code for a second public hearing?
Yes. Aye. Thank you.
Okay, so it's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. Feel better
Thanks,
soon,
Colin.
Colin.
Oh, Colin's under the weather.
Thank you all.
Yeah,
Got
you don't
Chris.
So
look
I can be
sick,
there.
Wearing a
but
tie.
I know. I was like, I thought you'd be in your jammies or something,
Maybe
but
he
no.
is. Maybe.
You didn't see me before the meeting started.
That's a cardboard thing right in front. Okay. We'll feel better soon. All right. So moving
Thank
on
you.
to item 14, we need to convene as the South Burlington Liquor Control Commission.
I move that we enter the South Burlington Liquor Control Commission.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Okay, and we have 802 cocktails, Applebee's.
What was the commercial kitchen? You forgot.
That's a different. Okay, the commercial caterer and third class commercial kitchen, Applebee's, cheese and wine traders,
Yeah.
Copper.
Copper at Dorset,
And then Target.
and Target store.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. It was 802. 802 Cocktails had the first class and third class commercial
Oh,
kitchen.
okay. So it's just
yeah, they go together. I'm sorry.
Alrighty. So
So I'll move that we approve all of these licenses.
Second.
any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. So they all are approved. Thank
So
you.
I move that we come out of the South Burlington Liquor Control Commission.
Second.
And I realized we never came out of the necessity hearing.
Was that a hearing? Oh, okay.
That's what it said.
We did.
Necessity
I
hearing.
thought we did. No?
Okay.
Well, that
Maybe we
was-
didn't.
Yeah, we did. We did. We came out of the city plan.
Do we need
Okay.
to
We didn't-
officially come out of it?
Necessity.
Sure.
All right.
Okay,
let's
I'll move that we
officially-
come out of the necessity hearing to consider the construction of an additional water tower on Dorset Street.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So Sue, you can put that in the right order, okay?
We're out of everything except for regular session.
We are just here. Okay, is there any other business? Seeing none, I would entertain an adjournment.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
An hour
Good night, everyone.
early. Have a great trip.
Thank you, Andrew.
Fun.
Thank you.